I stared at the text message from my neighbor, Pete, in disbelief. They're building something big on your grandfather's land. Looks like a clubhouse or something. Crews have been here for 2 weeks already. My hands trembled as I called Pete immediately. What do you mean they're building on my land? Who authorized this? The Pine Ridge HOA, Pete explained. They put up signs everywhere saying it's going to be their new community clubhouse and pool. I thought you must have sold the property to them. I absolutely did not, I said, feeling my blood pressure rising. That land was left to me and my grandfather's will just 3 months ago. I haven't even decided what to do with it yet. My grandfather's 5-acre parcel sat adjacent to the Pine Ridge subdivision, but it wasn't part of their development. It never had been. The land had been in my family for generations, and while I'd been busy with my job in the city, I'd let it sit vacant since inheriting it, visiting only twice to check on the old cabin and clear some fallen branches. I'll be there tomorrow morning, I told Pete. Don't tell anyone I'm coming. I want to see exactly what's happening before I reveal who I am. What Pete didn't know, what nobody in Pine Ridge knew, was that I wasn't just the absent grandson who'd inherited Old Man Johnson's land. I was also Michael Reeves, the county property commissioner who oversaw all land development, zoning regulations, and property disputes in Westlake County. I hung up and immediately called my assistant at the commission office. Diane, I need you to pull all permits filed for development on the old Johnson property on Lakeview Road. That's my grandfather's land that I inherited. Apparently, someone's building on it without my permission. On it, Michael. I'll have everything ready for you in the morning. I barely slept that night, imagining strangers destroying my grandfather's land. The property was special to me, it was where I'd spent summers fishing in the small pond, where Grandpa had taught me to identify birds and trees. The thought of bulldozers tearing through it made my stomach churn. I left the city at dawn, arriving at Pete's house by 8:30 a.m. He greeted me with a grim expression. It's worse than I thought, he said, leading me to his back porch. From there, I could see across his fence to my property beyond. My heart sank. A large area had been cleared, trees cut down, and the foundation for what looked like a substantial building was already in place. Construction equipment was parked everywhere, and workers were busily moving around the site. What the hell, I muttered. They didn't just start this yesterday. Been going for about 2 weeks now, Pete confirmed. They work fast. HOA president comes by every day to check progress. Who is the HOA president? Richard Blackwell. Real estate developer who built most of Pine Ridge. Real piece of work, thinks he owns everything around here. I took several photos with my phone, documenting the unauthorized construction. I'm going over there. Want me to come with you? Pete offered. No. I'd rather handle this myself. But thanks. I walked around to the access road that led to my property. As I approached the construction site, a man in an expensive suit was gesturing to a contractor, pointing at blueprints spread across the hood of a luxury SUV. I approached casually, not wanting to reveal my full identity yet. Morning, gentlemen. Quite a project you've got going here. The man in the suit turned, flashing a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, indeed. This is going to be the crown jewel of Pine Ridge. State-of-the-art clubhouse, Olympic-sized pool, tennis courts. Property values in the neighborhood will jump 15%, minimum. Sounds impressive, I said evenly. I'm curious though, who authorized building on this particular parcel? The man's smile tightened slightly. He extended his hand. Richard Blackwell, Pine Ridge HOA president and developer. And you are? Michael Johnson, I said, using my mother's maiden name to avoid recognition. This land belonged to my grandfather. Blackwell's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. Ah, Johnson. Yes, well, this property has been incorporated into our development plan for months now. All very official. Really? I said, maintaining my calm. Because my grandfather only passed away 3 months ago, and he left this property to me. I never authorized any development here. Blackwell laughed dismissively. There must be some misunderstanding. We have all the necessary approvals. This project is fully permitted and moving forward. May I see those permits? I asked. They're filed with the county, he said with a wave of his hand. Feel free to check with the Property Commission if you have concerns, but I assure you, everything is in order. Now if you'll excuse me, we have a schedule to maintain. I'll do that, I said, turning to leave. Have a good day, Mr. Blackwell. As I walked back to Pete's house, my mind was racing. I already knew what I'd find when I checked the permit records, absolutely nothing legitimate. But I needed to build my case carefully. Richard Blackwell had just made the biggest mistake of his career, and he didn't even know it yet. Back at my city apartment that evening, I spread out everything I'd gathered so far. Diane had emailed me the records as expected. No permits had been filed for development on my grandfather's land. Nothing. Not even an application that had been rejected. I called my colleague at the county legal department. James, I need your take on something. I've got an HOA building on private property without permits and without the owner's consent. Your property? James asked. Yes. My grandfather's land that I inherited. They're halfway through building a clubhouse on it. James let out a low whistle. That's bold. They have no legal right whatsoever. You could shut them down immediately. I know, I said. But I want to handle this carefully. If I go in as the property owner, they might try to fight it or damage the land out of spite. If I go in officially as the commissioner, I need to make sure I'm not accused of using my position for personal benefit. Document everything, James advised. Build an airtight case. Get the county inspector out there to officially document the unauthorized construction. Then you can approach it from both angles as the rightful owner and through official channels. That's what I was thinking, I agreed. I'll call Inspector Rodriguez tomorrow. The next day, I sent Rodriguez to the site as a routine inspection. His report came back even worse than I'd anticipated. Not only was the construction unauthorized, but it also violated multiple county regulations: inadequate setbacks from the pond, no environmental impact study for building near a water source, and electrical work that didn't meet code. Perfect. Now I had official documentation of multiple violations beyond just building on my land without permission. I spent the next 3 days gathering more evidence and planning my approach. I discovered that Richard Blackwell had a history of cutting corners on his developments and had been fined twice before for minor permit violations. But this was different. This was outright illegal construction on private property. I also learned that the HOA had told homeowners they were building on land they had acquired and had actually collected special assessment fees from each household to fund the clubhouse, to the tune of over $800,000. On Friday morning, I put on my most professional suit and drove back to Pine Ridge. It was time for Richard Blackwell to learn exactly who he'd been messing with. I arrived at the construction site just before 10 a.m., when I knew Blackwell would be there for his daily check-in. This time, I drove my official county vehicle and brought Inspector Rodriguez and James from legal with me. As expected, Blackwell was standing near the foundation, talking to the construction foreman. Both men looked up as our county vehicles pulled in. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," I said, approaching with my colleagues. "We met briefly earlier this week, but I don't believe I properly introduced myself." I handed him my business card. Michael Reeves, Westlake County Property Commissioner. The color drained from Blackwell's face as he looked from the card to my face. "You said your name was Johnson." "Johnson is my mother's maiden name. My full name is Michael Johnson Reeves. That was my grandfather's property you're building on, and I'm the legal owner." Blackwell's expression hardened. "This is a misunderstanding. We have an agreement." "With whom?" I interrupted. "Not with me. And not with my grandfather, whose property this was until his death 3 months ago. And certainly not with the county, as no permits have been filed or approved for this development." The construction foreman looked alarmed. Mr. Blackwell assured us all permits were in place. I turned to the foreman. I'm afraid they're not. Inspector Rodriguez here has documented multiple code violations in addition to the unauthorized use of private property. This is absurd, Blackwell sputtered. I'll have my attorney. You're welcome to call your attorney, James interrupted, handing Blackwell an official document. This is a cease and desist order requiring all construction to stop immediately. And this, he continued, handing over a second document, is a notice of violations with potential fines totaling over $150,000. Blackwell's face reddened. You can't do this. Do you know how much money we've already invested here? Money you collected from homeowners under false pretenses, I noted. You told them you had acquired this land legally. You didn't. That's fraud, Mr. Blackwell. We'll fight this, he threatened, pulling out his phone. I have connections at the state level. Feel free to use those connections, I said calmly. In the meantime, all work stops now, and all equipment must be off this property within 24 hours. I turned to the construction foreman. I'm sorry your company was misled, but no further work can be done here. Any equipment left on the property after tomorrow will be considered abandoned. The foreman nodded, clearly unhappy but understanding the situation. We'll shut it down right away. Before leaving, I addressed Blackwell one more time. I'll be at the Pine Ridge HOA meeting tomorrow evening to explain the situation to the homeowners who've been funding this illegal project. I suggest you be there as well. That night, I prepared carefully for the HOA meeting. I organized all my documentation, including photos of the unauthorized construction, copies of my grandfather's will and the property deed, the inspection reports, and the cease and desist order. I also printed copies of the Pine Ridge HOA bylaws, which I'd reviewed thoroughly. As I suspected, there was nothing in them that gave the HOA any authority over adjacent properties not part of the development. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the Pine Ridge Community Center. I arrived early and sat in the back, observing as homeowners filed in. There must have been at least 100 people present. Apparently, the promised clubhouse had generated a lot of interest. At precisely 7 p.m., Richard Blackwell walked to the front of the room, looking considerably less confident than when I'd first met him. He cleared his throat. Good evening, everyone. We have a situation regarding the clubhouse project that I need to address. Before he could continue, I stood up. Mr. Blackwell, if you don't mind, as the property owner and county property commissioner, I'd like to explain the situation directly. All heads turned toward me. Blackwell's jaw tightened, but he gestured for me to come forward. Thank you, I said, walking to the front of the room. My name is Michael Reeves. I'm the Westlake County Property Commissioner, and I'm also the legal owner of the property where your HOA has been building a clubhouse without permission. A murmur ran through the crowd. I held up my hand for quiet. 3 months ago, my grandfather, Robert Johnson, passed away and left his property to me. It's the 5-acre parcel with the pond adjacent to your development. At no point did I or my grandfather sell or transfer this land to the Pine Ridge HOA or to Mr. Blackwell. The murmurs grew louder. Someone called out, but we were told the land had been acquired. That's what I was told as well, I replied. Unfortunately, that information was false. Furthermore, no building permits were ever filed or approved for this project. The construction violates multiple county regulations and has been ordered to cease immediately. The room erupted in angry voices. One woman stood up, identifying herself as the HOA treasurer. We've collected over $800,000 from homeowners for this project. Each household paid $5,000 in special assessments. Where has that money gone? All eyes turned to Blackwell, who was now visibly sweating. The funds have been properly allocated to the project, he insisted. Materials, labor, design fees. For an illegal project on stolen land, someone shouted from the back. Not stolen, Blackwell countered desperately. There was a misunderstanding about ownership. We can resolve this. Perhaps we can negotiate with Mr. Reeves to purchase the property properly. I shook my head. I'm not interested in selling my grandfather's land. But even if I were, that doesn't change the fact that construction began without legal ownership, without permits, and in violation of county regulations. Another homeowner stood up. So what happens now? Do we lose all that money? That's a question for your HOA board and Mr. Blackwell, I said. As the county property commissioner, my concern is ensuring that all development in our county follows the law. As the property owner, my concern is protecting land that's been in my family for generations. I looked directly at Blackwell. However, I am concerned about the homeowners who've been misled. That's why I've prepared this. I held up a document. This is a formal complaint to the State Attorney General's office regarding potential fraud in the collection and use of HOA funds for an unauthorized project. I haven't submitted it yet, because I wanted to give Mr. Blackwell and the HOA board an opportunity to make this right. What does making it right look like to you? Asked a man who identified himself as an HOA board member. Full restitution to all homeowners for their special assessment fees, I said firmly. Restoration of my property to its original condition. And Mr. Blackwell's resignation from the HOA board. That's outrageous. Blackwell exploded. You're using your position to pursue a personal vendetta. No, Mr. Blackwell. I'm enforcing the law while also trying to protect the homeowners you've deceived. And I've been extremely careful to separate my official duties from my personal interest in this matter, as my colleagues at the county can attest. I gestured to James and Inspector Rodriguez, who were sitting near the front. Every action I've taken has been documented and reviewed by the county legal department to ensure there's no conflict of interest. The cease and desist order would have been issued regardless of who owned the property, because the construction is unauthorized and unsafe. The room fell silent as people absorbed this information. Finally, the woman who'd identified herself as the treasurer spoke again. I move that we accept Commissioner Reeves' terms. I also move that we conduct a full audit of the HOA finances, particularly regarding this project. I second that motion, said another homeowner immediately. Blackwell looked around desperately, but it was clear he'd lost the room. All in favor, the treasurer asked. Nearly every hand in the room went up. The motion passes, she declared. Mr. Blackwell, I believe the commissioner has asked for your resignation. Blackwell's shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. I resign, effective immediately. But this isn't over. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, it is over, I said quietly. Unless you'd prefer I submit this complaint to the Attorney General after all. The choice is yours. He glared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. The aftermath unfolded over the next several weeks. True to their word, the HOA hired an independent contractor to restore my property to its original condition as much as possible. The trees couldn't be replaced, of course, but they reseeded the cleared areas and removed all construction materials. The financial audit revealed that Blackwell had indeed misused some of the collected funds, diverting about $200,000 to other projects and personal expenses. The HOA filed a civil suit against him and eventually recovered most of the money. Every homeowner received a full refund of their special assessment fee, though it took several months to complete all the reimbursements. As for me, I decided to honor my grandfather's memory in the best way I could think of. I worked with the county conservation department to place the entire 5-acre parcel into a land trust, ensuring it would remain undeveloped forever. I also built a small pavilion by the pond with all proper permits, of course, and opened it to the public as a nature area named after my grandfather. Ironically, it served much the same purpose as a community gathering place that the clubhouse would have, but without destroying the natural beauty of the land. 6 months after that confrontational HOA meeting, I hosted a dedication ceremony for the Robert Johnson Memorial Park. Many Pine Ridge residents attended, including Pete and the former HOA treasurer, who had been elected the new HOA president. You know, she said to me as we watched children fishing in the pond, in a strange way, Blackwell did bring the community together. Just not in the way he intended. I smiled, watching a blue heron land gracefully at the pond's edge, just as they had when my grandfather and I would sit there years ago. My grandfather always said that land had a purpose, I told her. I think he'd be happy with how things turned out. As the sun set over the pond, casting golden light across the water, I knew he would be. Justice had been served, not just for me or for the homeowners who'd been deceived, but for the land itself, preserved now for future generations to enjoy, just as my family always had. Sometimes, karma works in mysterious ways. Richard Blackwell never knew he was building on the property commissioner's land, but he certainly learned a valuable lesson about respecting property rights and following the law. And I learned something too, that sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making things right.